So exciting. Hello and welcome to another Massachusetts Environthon webinar. Woohoo. We're glad you could join us this afternoon in the middle of a snowstorm to learn all about tree measurement with the fabulous Felicia Hubacz from DCR Forest Health. Woohoo. Thank you for being here, Felicia. And I will stop this share and I'm going to go in and hide in just a second. I'm Brenda Dempsey, your friendly neighborhood environmental coordinator. And all you audience, if you have questions, either type them in the chat or the question and answer, and I will make sure Felicia sees them and we'll get some answers for you. Glad you could be here today.
All right. Can you see my screen all right? All right. Okay, folks. So my name is Felicia Hubacz. I'm the new station leader for the forestry station. I'm taken over from Joe Perry. Typically, this forest measurements presentation is it's best done when you're outside and you're in person. It's really hard to kind of do this virtually, but I'm going to do the best I can. And I highly recommend that you, as soon as you can, try some of these techniques outside. Obviously, it's a little tough today because of the snow, but this is recorded, so let's get started. So what is forest measurements? This is just a fancy way of saying we're getting data out of the forest. We're using science and we're presenting measurable data about tree stands as they relate to a variety of things, whether it's forest management, silviculture, or just research, because that's becoming more and more prevalent as we go on, and we'll talk about that later. Forest measurements are important because if you don't know what you have out there in the forest, how can you know how to manage it or what it's worth? So it's very important to go out there and take these measurements and understand what's there for stand capacity as well as health. And then we take the data and we do a whole bunch of things with it. We can use it in forest inventory, site growth capacity, forest health, sustainable capacity, also for wildfire risks, wildlife, and watershed. So there's a lot of reasons to take forest measurements. If you look right there at that picture, that's an arbor jet system, and that's a hemlock. And one of the things that we do as part of the forest health program in Massachusetts is we like to go out and treat trees that have serious problems. As you know, hemlocks have been fighting hemlock woolly adelgid and elongate scale for some time. So when we have a stand of hemlocks that's really important to us, we want to go out there and treat them. And this is the system we use. And it's really important for us to know the size of the tree so that we can put in the proper amount of chemical. If too much, you could damage the tree. Too little, you've just wasted a bunch of money because it's not going to kill anything. Other ways of using this data is, well, I have to say it, as a product for sale. Trees have long been used for timber, lumber, our homes, everything. You know, we use wood very readily, and that's a great thing. I don't want to say that's a bad thing. But the other thing that we use this data for is also to pick up subtle changes that are going on in the environment. So we can catch health problems, we can catch stand issues. If we go out and measure on a regular basis, we can get that kind of information. This is FIA data. Every year, all the states put in their FIA data to the USDA, and they make up these really nice fact sheets. Now, I took these because they were very recent. 2020s isn't done yet. They're still compiling it. And I just wanted to show you some of the information that gets put out. And this is all from forest measurements. So here you can see at the top, right here, that's how much is forested in 2018. In 2019, it went down a percentage. Right here, it tells you how many acres are forested. Once again, you can see that change from year to year. And then down here, How many acres of non-forest went back to forest annually? That was quite a bit in 2018. However, in 2019, that number dropped. So you can gain a ton of information on this. And one of the things I'd like to point out while we're here is Massachusetts has, give or take, 3 million acres of forested land. And the majority of that is owned by private entities. So more than half of all forested land in Massachusetts is owned by private landowners. And that means that anything can happen. That's not permanently protected unless those homeowners actually put that into it. So looking at these things, we can gain trends and the status of our forest, especially long-term. This is just year to year. But if you go to this website here, you could even just look up USDA FIA data, and you can grab these off the website, just play with it. And it's a lot of fun. But more importantly, it gives you an idea of what's going on in our forest. And it's not always a happy story. So I talk about forest inventory. I kind of put the cart before the horse. Forest inventory is just learning about, writing down, characterizing all of the trees within the forest. But you're not doing it just for lumber or anything like that, as I've said. You're doing it for a variety of reasons. Here, I just took a photo off of Google, and I added in some points to give you an idea of how we actually go about doing a forest inventory. You can't measure every single tree. It's just impossible. It's very time consuming. So to get around that, foresters will use a lot of hidden mathematics, and you'll see that, and it'll be a theme throughout this. Instead of going out and measuring every single tree, we'll go out and we'll throw plots in, and very randomly. They can be scattered, but typically when I go out and do a forest inventory, I like my plots in a grid pattern, a random grid pattern. That way it's just easier for me to walk from one plot to the next using a compass and my pacing, which is how far I walk. So that's another thing that, I can go on and on and on with the forest measurements with all the different things that goes into it. But quite honestly, we're only going to be talking about 2 today. So we're going to talk about measuring trees for board foot volume and actually for everything else. These are the 2 main basic measurements that you need, and you can use these for pretty much anything. If you have these 2 measurements, you're doing really, really, really well. So I am going to talk about volume tables at the end, but first I want to make sure you understand exactly how to take proper diameter and take proper height, and we'll talk about the process and the tools. Yeah, not forgetting anything. So measuring the diameter of a tree, there's 3 different types of tools that are available. You have the Biltmore Stick, calipers, and DBH tapes. And all of these use like a hidden mathematics. So diameter, I'm sure you all know what diameter is. It's the widest part of a circle. But in order to get that on a tree, we can't exactly cut the tree down and measure through it. So what we want to do is use a diameter tape. Those are really awesome, and I'll talk about each tool later, but diameter tapes are the most accurate of all the measurements. Now, we do provide diameter tapes in our little kits. So if you folks don't have one, you can either make your own, and you can follow this link down here at the bottom. It's fairly easy. It's just a little bit of work. Or you can ask your coach to contact Britta, and we do have little kits that contain DBH tapes and a couple of other things. So when I say DBH, that's a very common term. It means diameter at breast height. What is breast height? Everybody's different. So breast height, we're talking about 4.5 feet. And that was actually something that came up a long time ago forester named Pinchot, who was a very tall guy. He arbitrarily picked 4.5 feet, and it has just stuck ever since, and it's become a rule of thumb. So the diameter tape I was talking about, what you want to do with this is you want to wrap it around the tree. Give the tree a good bear hug. Don't be afraid to get in there. But before you do that, walk around the tree first to make sure there's nothing on the trunk. I have gotten many poison ivy rashes because I didn't look around the tree. So if you see any vines that are very hairy, that's poison ivy. And if you're allergic, please be aware. Pick another tree. So you want to give your tree a big bear hug, wrap that diameter tape around it. You want to make sure that that tape stays completely perpendicular to the tree trunk. You want it to be as straight as possible. You don't want the tape to be twisted, and you don't want it to be slack or at an angle. That'll give you a bad reading every time. Now, I'm not the tallest person in the world, so I know that my DBH is set just around my chin area. Now for you, I highly recommend that you take a little Post-it note and mark where 4.5 feet is on your wall, and just get used to bringing your arms up to that level. And that you'll get that muscle memory. That's what a lot of foresters do. We don't measure 4.5 feet off the ground every time. We just learn the muscle memory for where that location is, and that helps us. All these diameter tapes and all of these tools have math hidden behind them. So these are actually calibrated so that it automatically takes circumference and turns it over to diameter. Now, if you wanted to do that yourself and test your tape out, you could simply take the circumference of a tree, divide it by pi, and that'll get your diameter. But it's so much easier just to use one of the tools that already has the math built into it. So here you can see me taking this measurement. And then to actually read this, you're going to, oops, sorry guys. So you're going to look right here. So that's like the 0 line. And we want to line that 0 line up to the top. So here's the big number 9. So it's going to be a 9-inch DBH, and then have all these other numbers. So we're looking at 9 point, and you go up, and it'll be 7, 5. So I hope you guys see that, okay?
Can you zoom in anymore?
No, unfortunately.
All right.
I'm sorry, guys. It was a small tape. But, so you're just matching those lines up. A lot of times you don't need the decimal places. You're only going for that whole number. But if you're going for something more research-based, scientific, you want to get as accurate as possible. So a lot of it depends on exactly what you're doing with it. You'll notice that that last tree was perfectly straight, just like this one. So not all trees grow perfectly straight and are perfectly normal. As one of my professors used to say, the trees don't read the books, so they just do whatever. But if you're on a different a slope or an uneven ground, you always want to go over to the uppermost part. And that's because this is going to be more root. You're really not going to be considering that when you're taking your measurements. One thing to think about when you are taking these measurements is if you think about it more along the lines of lumber or timber. You're taking this measurement to see how much usable wood is in that. So you don't want to be measuring things that that aren't going to be playing a role in any of that. So if it's on a slope like this, you're not going to be using that. You want to measure from the upland and hit here. If it's a leaning tree, you want to make sure that you're measuring 4.5 feet up, and you want to do that parallel to the trunk. So you don't want to go straight up and down as if the tree is straight up and down. You want to measure that along the trunk, and then do your DBH tape once again, keeping it parallel to the trunk. I mean, perpendicular to the trunk. Oy vey. Down here, we have trees forking at or around that diameter point. So if the tree forks above the diameter point, you want to bring it down just a little bit. And if the tree is forking below 4.5 feet at this point, what you want to do is go up here and measure these two separately as two separate trees. And that'll give you a more accurate reading. And of course, if there's any irregularities, like you have a weird bottleneck tree or a tree with deformity like a bowl or a canker, you don't want to measure that because that'll mess your readings up. Okay, so this is DBH tape, and like I said, it is the most accurate measurement out there. So we're going to go from the most accurate to the least accurate. This is the Biltmore stick, or AKA, so people call it the cruiser stick, and they're so fast and so handy. However, they are, you really have to be careful, otherwise it will not be accurate. So these look like a yardstick, basically, and you could even make your own. If you go to the Envirothon website under the forestry resources, there is a link that shows you how to make your own Biltmore stick. You won't get as many measurements on it, but you still get the point. And you're going to read it from this top right here. So you're not going to be too worried about the rest of these. These are volume charts, which I'll talk about at the end. So using the Biltmore stick, let's look at this diagram here with this lovely young lady. I took this image from openoregon.com right here. It's a really nice resource. It's forest measurements, and they really get into the discussion and some of the math. So if you're really interested in forest measurements, you get a kick out of it, I would recommend that you look that up and read it. You'll get a little bit more out of that. So once again, it's a Biltmore stick, so we have to hold it a certain amount of space away from our eyes. That's always going to be 25 inches. So this girl's got this 25 inches away from her eyes, and she's holding it, you know, completely similar to the DBH tape. You want it to be completely even and level with the ground. And you're going to hold this part up so to your eyes, it comes even with the trunk. And then you're going to read this portion right here. Lots of ways to mess this up. As you can see, this picture right here, this is an incorrect measurement because the stick goes beyond the trunk. You want the stick to be completely flat, and then you can read over here. The other thing you want to be aware of when using a Biltmore stick is not all trees are perfectly round. So a perfectly round tree, you can get this DBH and just do one side and it'll be pretty accurate. However, if it's a tree's oval or has some irregularities in it and you just measure from one side, it's going to be grossly off. So while Biltmore sticks are great, you can just run up to a tree, place it up against the tree and read it. If you're not doing it right, the estimate is garbage. So this is the proper way to use a Biltmore stick. You hold it out 25 inches. Some people will put a 25-inch string right in that little hole. So when they hold it out, they put that string to their body and they always know it's 25 inches. And so this is right lined up. And then from our eye, we look, and it is just over 7 dBH. Okay, that's how you would read that. And with Biltmore sticks, like I said, you want to do at least 2 measurements or even 3, and then average them out to get your accuracy. Forest calipers, these are along the same idea as the Biltmore sticks. Here you can see the DBH running along this along the bar, and over here it's hidden under this. And what you do is you just open it up and slide it back and forth so that you know that that's the DBH of the tree, and then it'll tell you what it is right here. So these are a little bit more accurate than Biltmore sticks because you know for a fact you're hitting both sides of that tree. But once again, you do need to take multiple averages around the tree so that you can get a more accurate DBH. All right, so now we're going to talk about tree height. And there's 2 essential measurements when you're talking about tree height. And that's merchantable height and the total tree height. Now, depending on what you're doing, it's going to make a big difference. So the total tree height is very easy. That's you're getting that from the base of the tree, the root flares, and you're going all the way to the tippity top of that branch. Very easy. However, more merchantable height, you're not getting it from the root flare. You want to go just above. Because when they cut that tree down, they're not cutting at the root flare. They usually do it about a foot off the ground to leave a stump. So that's where you have to measure at the bottom. And then you're going to go up the tree. And I used a deciduous tree here just to really throw home the message, is we're only grabbing the merchantable stuff. And we go up to a height where the DBH is only 6 inches. Some places that's a different number, but in Massachusetts, that's a very common number. So let's say this tree was out in the woods and we wanted to use this. You measure from right here and then up to where the branches get really teeny tiny, because at that point, they're not usable lumber. Okay, now if it was on a conifer, which would be more pyramidal in shape, you could get up much higher, because they typically have one strong trunk going up through the tree versus a deciduous tree, which has all those branches. So like diameter, there's a bunch of different tools. And once again, the math is hidden in the tool, so that while we're out in the forest, we're not doing calculations. So talk about each one of these, and all the math is based on like triangle. So it's, if you're really good with trig, geometry, I say go for it. Have some fun with tree measurements. So the first tree height we're looking at tool is the kilometer. And once again, this is working off of triangles. I'm not going to get too much into this because the tangent tree height follows a similar rule, so I'm going to talk more about it there. But the kilometer, this is the eyepiece. So you look in through here, where you're standing right about here, and you look up at the top of the tree, and you'll actually get your angle right here. And then all you would need to do is measure the tree, and you can use your mathematics to figure it out. The abney level is another tool that's used for measuring percent grade, topographic elevation, degrees, and it can be used to determine height, volume, and grade using trigonometry. However, this, I don't think I've ever seen this used in forestry. Maybe out west it has, but locally it's more for land surveying. Now the spiegel or glop, I hope I'm saying that right. This is a really cool tool. This little guy sits on top of a pole, kind of like a surveyor uses. And you can look in this and you can measure the basal area of a stand. That's another forest measurement that I'm not going to get too much into here. And it can also measure the height and diameter of a tree at any point. So the big reason for using this is that if you don't know what 6-inch DBH looks like in the top of a tree, we can then look through this and it will tell you how big that trunk DBH is by there's certain markers inside. I should have taken a picture and put it up there. So this is really cool. I personally have never used one, but I would have lots of fun if I ever got my hands on one, I'm sure. So this is what I learned on the tangent height gauge, and it's very similar to the kilometer because of the math. Now, this is a really sweet tool, and this is one of the tools that's in that kit that we send out to coaches if they require it, if they request it, sorry. And so this, it comes with all the instructions right on it, and it's very easy to follow. You start by looking through these little guys right here, these little loops on the top, and this is a mirror. And here, right here is one of those levels with the bubble in it. So when we look through it, we want to look through these two little rings to see the top of a tree. See the top of the tree here. And this obviously I'm not looking through this properly. But while we're looking at the top of the tree, we want to look in this mirror to make sure that that bubble, this bubble right here, is in between those two black lines. And I'm sorry, I took many photographs trying to get this to show better, but I wanted you to understand how it was used. So once you understand that, then you get out there. Some people will put a 100-foot tape measure out, just lay it right out, and you can start somewhere in there and look through that, through those rings at the top of a tree. And you want to move forward and backwards until you can see the top of the tree through those two rings, and that little level bubble is right in the center. Once you hit that, you're going to put a little mark on the ground, and you're going to measure this distance or look at the tape to see what distance you're at. Then you want to measure the height all the way up to your eyes, because that's where you're taking the measurement from. So for an example, let's say we did this and the tree was 70 feet away, and I'm a really tall person and my eyes are at 5 feet. So we just take the height of the object, the distance plus the height, pop in the numbers, and bam, 75 is how tall the tree is. You see how easy that is? That's the kind of math that I like. One thing to be careful for, if you're doing a conifer like a pine or hemlock, they're very pyramidal, and that's awesome because you can find that top no problem. But if you're doing a deciduous tree, you have to be careful for these side branches. So I would recommend walking around the tree to see what the best view of that top is before starting to look for your measurements. You want to make sure that you are seeing the top and not this, because if you do measure this instead of the top, that line actually ends up a lot higher, and you end up you end up getting an exaggerated measurement, which will throw everything off. So a hypsometer, now this is what I use on a regular basis. It's like a laser rangefinder, and it's so easy and so fast to use that I highly recommend it if you have the money. But yeah, they can be a little expensive. And if you're not doing this every day, then it's not worth it. But so to use this, there's a little eyepiece back here, and you got the buttons on top and a digital screen. So you start at like this point, this little line is going to be me standing there. And notice that I can do this on level ground or on a slope. And my first measurement is going to be just the distance. So I want to go straight across to the tree. Typically, I'll look for a little mark on the bark or something so that I know I can go right back to that place if I need to. And then I will point it down at the root flare if I'm looking for total height, and get that measurement. So it'll give me a measurement for this portion. And then I do the same thing, but for the top. And it'll give me a measurement for this portion. And then from there, I just add those two up, and that gives me my total height. Very easy. Now a merit hypsometer, this is also easy. And on the other thing, the other hypsometer too, is like, if you can't see the tree, if you can't get a good view of the tree, the top and the bottom through all the other trees, it's going to be very difficult to get a true height. And you might end up having to measure a tree next to it in order to get the height of that one. So you'd be comparing two trees side by side. It's happened. So the merit hypsometer, this is actually on Biltmore sticks. So on the side, if we just flip this over, you'd see all those crazy numbers, and it would look very familiar. But here's the narrow end of the stick and the instructions. So we want to stand 66 feet from the tree. And that 66 feet, they call it a chain, and that was a very common measurement for foresters. So we want to take this, hold it out 25 inches from our eye. It's like the magic number, 25 inches. And we're going to hold it straight up and down. Now I did this, and I didn't use it properly. Here, I took this. The bottom should be at the bottom of a tree here, and I should be 66 feet away. However, if you notice through this bunch of trees, it's almost impossible to see what's actually 66 feet away. So I wanted you to see how difficult it can sometimes be to measure a tree in a crowded situation. So get used to walking around a little bit. But anyway, so if this tree had, let's just imagine that the base of this stick was at the base of this tree right here. All right, I'm gonna use my pen. So we're gonna say that's where the base of this is. We're just gonna pretend. And then we have these numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can barely see it. It says 5 right up here. Each one of these is considered 1 log. And a log is typically 16 feet. So when you get these logs on the ground, how many logs do you have? I have 5 logs, each one 16 feet. You just do the math. But so here we have this tree. So let's just pretend that would be 1 log. Here's number 2. Here's the second log. 3, the third log. We're going up to 4. Now, it's hard to tell here because I can't quite see if this is 6 inches or not. So we'll just play it safe and go half. So now we've got, 16, 32. Then we move up, and then 8 feet right there. And that would give you how many logs you have. I hope I explained that right. And the reason that we do this is take these, the height and the diameter, is so that we can then figure out what board foot volume is. So board foot volume, it's a very common measurement that we use when we're talking about trees as lumber. And here's just a very simple 1 board foot, and it's 1 foot by 1 foot and an inch wide, sorry. So we want to know how much volume we have in these trees. So like I said, the math's already been done for us, and it's on the Biltmore sticks here. I can zoom in a little bit there for you. So it's on the Biltmore sticks. It's a little hard to read, but you can see the volume charts here. So to make it a little easier for you, I used one of these old cards that the DCR used to give out to loggers. We're looking at possibly recreating some of these cards. We do have them in our kits, but there's also a chart in the forestry manual that has this in it. So the way these work is by using this fancy formula right here. But we don't have to use that formula. They've done it for us. So all we need is the DBH and the height. And the form class, that has to do with type of tree. That's nothing that we need to get into here. So let's do one for an example. This is actually the chart I took right out of the forestry manual, and got a nice little instructions right here. But let's look at the example. So if we had a white pine and we measured it, and we had a DBH, diameter breast height, of 20 inches, and we found the merchantable height was 3 logs, that would give us a total volume of 400 board feet. And we can see this by looking at going down the DBH, finding our 20. Then we go back to the top, and in case we forgot the size of the logs, it tells us number of foot logs is 16 foot logs. And it's very common to use halves. So 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, that was where our measurement was. And so that's how we get our 400 board feet out of one tree. Obviously, if you have more than one tree, you would add them all up, and that would be the amount of board feet that you could get out of your stand. So that was a lot of information. If we were together right now, I would ask you guys to all go out and start trying some of these, and I would walk around and help you out. However, I'm not with you guys. So if you do go out and try these out and have problems, here is my contact information. I'm more than willing to walk you through it and help you out, because these are really important measurements, and they're used for so many different things. Even though there are other measurements that come with forestry, these are the ones that are used over and over and over again, not just for timber, but for treatments and for management. We want to make sure that our stands are doing what we want. And nowadays, it's not just a matter of lumber. We're very concerned about climate and how the forest is doing, and making sure that the forest has the ability to shift with the changing climate. And all of that is done by making sure the forest is healthy and using these measurements. Questions?
Thank you, Felicia.
You're
Folks
welcome.
in the audience, if you have questions, you can either type them in the question and answer or put something in the chat. It's a small enough group, I'd be happy to let you talk. So you can talk directly with us. Just let me know that you're interested in that. And if you're interested in borrowing the kit, send me an email, mathsandmarathon@gmail.com. And we'll get you hooked up with some of this equipment since we can't be there in person. All right, Jamie says, I remember last year we measured basal area with those yellow pieces of maybe glass to see where
Yes.
the sides of the trunk lined up.
Yep. Yep. And that's a prism. And prisms are used to find the basal area. So basal area is a number that you look for when you're doing a timber stand. You're trying to figure out what's there. You want to find out how much area is. And it's a little tiny prism. And you hold it up and you look through it. And when the trunk is perfectly lined up, as long as the trunk is touching the trunk inside that glass, it's considered in. And then you want to take the rest of your measurements. If it's considered out, then you don't measure that one tree. It's definitely used for more timber management. So I hope I explained that all right.
And what height of the tree is that basal area prism used for?
I'm sorry?
What height of the tree is this taken at for that prism?
It's usually at eye level. Yeah.
Jamie, does that answer your question? Excellent. I wanted to make sure I was asking it right because honestly, I have no idea. So I learned a whole bunch of stuff today. Bravo.
Yep.
Yeah, so we have a Biltmore stick that you can borrow. We have those green tangent measuring, the green triangle as I refer to them as, and some Trinity books. You usually get measuring tape too for measuring distance from the tree, right? It should go in that box. Probably.
Yep.
Okay. Great. I'll get that and put it together. You can email me if you're interested in borrowing that for your team. Happy to mail it to you. Any other questions for Felicia right now? All right. Well, thank you so much for being here tonight. And thank you to Felicia for sharing all this with us. We appreciate everyone's time and look forward to getting out in the, not during a blizzard, but in the near future, go hug a tree.
Yes, hug a tree.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you, guys.